How's it going, everyone? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Chaos Head Noah. I'm a little excited for this episode because Takumi gets to go back home to which has been not necessarily pillaged, but has definitely been entered upon by other characters without his knowing. And I'm curious if he will notice that something is wrong. I'd be surprised if he actually didn't notice something was wrong, because I'm pretty sure Senna broke the padlock that was on the door to his base, so I guess we'll find out. This is Takumi we're talking about here. But in the last episode and the episode prior, we were doing some hospital exploring, which is always fun. Definitely not scary at all, and definitely not mysterious in any sort of ways, because nothing ever happens in a hospital, am I right? We parted ways with Misumi-kun at the station and then headed straight back to my base. The whole way there, it felt like I was stumbling my way through a nightmare. Oh, yeah, you know what? Very important point that came up at the end of the last episode is that apparently, notice how I say apparently, I'm not really sure, according to sources, let's say, the culprit behind at least the crucifixion case has been caught, maybe? The person that did that actual incident. But I still have so many questions, and if anything, there being a culprit that has been caught has raised more questions than any have been answered. Nanami's face kept popping into my mind. Oh yeah, that also happened. We got a call from Nanami. Man, the last episode really just was throwing stuff at us. Honestly, the last two episodes. And each time it did, her expression was different. Nanami had always been the type to wear her heart on her sleeve. When she was angry, she'd puff out her cheeks and pout, and when she was happy, she'd smile so wide it'd make even me embarrassed. Memories of all those different expressions made my heart thump again and again, almost painfully so. That phone call from before, the things that she'd said, what the hell had they meant? They could only mean that the bandage wrapped around her arm when I'd seen her at school must have been... Where could she be now, at school? Or maybe she'd already gone back home. You know, we could have gone back to the house and checked, maybe? Supported by Rimi, the two of us came out on the roof. Oh boy. What do we want to do here? You know, it's been a while since we've done anything on the bad side.
これから実家に帰ってみようと思うんだ。
これから急だね。
歩いても30分もかからないところなんだ。それで一緒についてきてほしい。
As I made that request, I was so nervous, my heart felt like it would actually burst out of my chest. I was even somewhat surprised that those words had managed to come out of my mouth at all. Asking someone for something, it was something I'd never been able to do before now. So will we get a delusion here, or will we just continue along? Oh? She firmly declined. I couldn't believe my ears. I would have never thought she'd respond like that. Before that moment, Rimi had always listened to me, no matter how selfish I was being. She had always helped me, supported me. So I'd assume that she would agree without question, no matter what I asked her. But now that I thought about it again, I was the weird one for assuming she'd never refuse. I'd gotten too used to her taking care of me. I was being too presumptuous, expecting too much of her. Rimi turned her back to me, and then she wrapped her arms around herself.
それに、タクも行かない方がいい。
それってどういう？
実家には戻らないで。
She spoke firmly, almost like she was ordering me not to go. I was at a loss. I had no idea what Rimi was trying to achieve by saying that. What kind of face was Rimi making as she had her back to me? I didn't know.
わけがわからない。
あなたは何も知らなくていい。
Her voice carried a sense of urgency. She felt like a completely different person from before.
ここで、このコンテナハウスだけでずっと生きていけばいいの。
What the?
そうしてもらわないと 困るんだ。
Won't end well? Wait, this was a delusion, right? Or was it real? Suddenly, yeah, what the fuck's happening? A high-pitched sound pierced my ears. One that sounded almost like a woman's scream. Oh? A strong gust of wind swept over the rooftop. The air trembled. My vision was overwhelmed by a blinding sheet of deep crimson. With no idea what had just happened, I turned my face to the light. And when I looked on top of the container house, there she stood. Oh. Hello. Damn, she's so cool. Aoi Senna, D-sword in hand, as per usual. The source of the light was her D-sword glimmering against the sky, but something was strange. When I had seen it before, Senna's D-sword had emitted a blue glow. The sound vanished, the wind stopped. Oh, she rebooted that shit.
答える。
Her voice was sharp, her glare cold. Her eyes glistened with unmistakable animosity.
これを書いたのはお前か？
As she spoke, she thrust out a piece of paper with Ir2 scribbled on it. My essay, for some reason it was all scrunched up. Why did Senna have that? Why was Senna here? Illegal trespassing, those words popped into my head, immediately followed by the realization that she had searched my room. But what for?
答えろと言っている。
そうだけど、だから。
Next came the sound of Kozupi's inner voice. She was behind Senna. She was clinging to Senna's legs, and her face was peeking out from behind them. She had an urgent look on her face as she looked at me. Right as Kozupi screamed, Senna leapt from the roof. She held the sword high and... Rimi yanked my arm and I fell backward. I quickly looked back up and then saw the place I'd been standing only moments prior. Senna's sword had hollowed out the floor of the rooftop. It had such an insane destructive power, such tremendous sharpness that it didn't feel real. The impact had been great enough to destroy the concrete, and yet the sword didn't even have a scratch on it. Weren't D-swords supposed to be things people couldn't see, let alone touch? A certain term crossed my mind. Real boot. Her sword had been real booted. Through the mutual recognition of the four people here, Senna's D-sword had gone from her delusion to reality. It was now a great sword that could cut down a person for real. If Rimi hadn't pulled me away in time, I would have been bisected from head to toe by that beautiful sword of hers. It would have been instant death. Shivers ran down my entire body. Just now, Senna had unmistakably tried to kill me. Why? My head was overrun with confusion. The two of us had been eating crunchy-coons together just the other day. Kozupi had been there with us. It was true that our relationship wasn't far enough for me to call us friends, and that even back then, Senna had been acting scary the whole time. But even so, she shouldn't have hated me enough to suddenly come after me with a D-sword.
殺してやる。
Senna raised her head. She glared at me even more intensely than before. Her movements were incredibly fast, in spite of the fact that she was holding a gigantic sword. What a lovely fact that is. She kicked off the ground like she was starting a 500-meter dash. The tip of her sword scraped against the ground as she brandished it, closing the distance between us. She raised the weapon above her head. In that instant, my instincts worked out exactly what kind of situation I was in. She was serious. Senna was deathly serious. As I lay face up in a total heap, I let out a shriek. I couldn't run away. None of this made any sense. Getting a game over like this, desperately running away from Shogun, yet getting surprise attacked by Senna as a result of it. It was far too ridiculous, Far too sudden. I didn't want this. I didn't want to die. I really didn't want to die. Right then, a single silhouette leapt above me and landed between me and Senna. When I looked to see who it was, I realized it was Rimi. She stretched her arms out wide to bar the way of the approaching girl. Was she putting her life on the line just to shield me?
どけ
But if she did that, she was gonna die. I didn't want that.
咲畑さんには気をつけて。
Suddenly, what Kozupi had said before reappeared in my mind. Pale light leaked past Rimi's outstretched arms. Oh, here we
咲
go.
畑さんはよくわかんないのら。
Rimi.
タクに手を出さないで。
Unifying the overflowing light, she placed her arms together. Oh, we've seen this before. The air warped and shook. Coming seemingly from thin air, feathers of shining light burst around Rimi and danced in the surrounding air. And then what appeared in her hands. Effortlessly blocked the fierce downward swing of Senna's gigantic sword.
タクを追い詰めないで。
It was all too graceful to be called a sword. All too imperial? Let's go with that. Enough to easily be mistaken for the wings of an angel. Then I realized a certain fact. That she, Sakihata Rimi, sorry. Tried to throw a K in there instead of an M. Was a gigalomaniac. You know, sometimes I just can't read. Ever. Overwhelmed with shock, Aoi Senna looked at the face of the girl that stood before her. Yeah, that's, it is quite the interesting design, if I do say so myself, but we saw this in the very beginning. It was kind of hard to comprehend what was going on in the very beginning, but this is sort of what we saw, a two-piece sort of blade or whatever. That winged sword that had so effortlessly blocked the attack of her D-sword was clearly a D-sword itself. If the girl she now faced was not accustomed to wielding a D-sword, she would not have been able to block Senna's attack with such perfect timing.
咲畑さんもギガロマニアックスだったのら。
Which, you know, probably makes a whole lot of sense because she obviously knows more than really anybody here, I would argue, because she was seen with Shogun, right? She was in the same room as him, right? And also, there's no way that she could have helped Takumi whatsoever here if she could not see... Oh, actually, no, I guess the sword was real booted, but if she didn't know what it was, I guess she could still help him, but... No, she did seem to give hints here and there that she knew what was up. Kozoe stared down at the three people from atop the container house as if she was a spectator. Her dangling legs swung back and forth again and again. Sure acting carefree for someone who ruined my surprise attack, thought Senna, clicking her tongue inside her head. However, despite her moving thoughts, she did not remove her gaze from Rimi's eyes. Her opponent had a brooding look on her face. Nishijo Takumi moaned from behind Rimi, having sunk to the ground in a pathetic display. Senna's target was ultimately him, so she had no intention of fighting with Rimi. Besides, this was no manga, nor was it an anime, so a D-sword battle was not a particularly realistic thing to occur.
その男が何をしたか知っているのか ?IR2 という公式を。
知ってるよ。
What is this? Senna had been interrupted by a quiet, sorrowful, yet decisive response. Upon hearing that, Senna tightened the grip on her D-sword.
それなら
タクを覚醒させればもっと大変なことになる。
その前に殺す。
あなたには無理だよ。
Senna decided that there is no point in talking further. She brandished her sword in In a what stance? Before her, Rimi stood readily. Nishijo Takumi lay about 5 long strides away from her. At this distance, it would take 3 seconds to resolve things completely. Without hesitation, Senna rushed toward Rimi from the front. Aiming straight for the girl, she swept her D-sword toward her flank. Rimi attempted to block it like before, but Senna's strike had been a feint. Her sword passed through both Rimi's sword and body. She had released the real boot. At present, Senna's D-sword was no more than a delusion. It could touch nothing, it could cut nothing, it could kill nothing. But that had been her very aim. Due to having twisted her body to block the attack, Rimi's reactions would be slow. During that time frame, Senna had already slipped past her and made it 2 steps closer to Takumi. Oh, here we go again. She real booted the sword once again in an instant. This is it. Takumi faced Senna with eyes of fear as she effortlessly real booted the sword. With her D-sword that had once again become real, she moved to pierce Takumi's heart.
Senna.
Oh, god damn, bro. I was trying to get a drink right there. I thought I timed it perfect too, but nope. A figure flew past the corner of her vision. The instant she heard its voice, the girl, fiercely shaken by it, missed her target. The tip of the sword grazed Takumi's leg and stabbed it into the concrete. Senna slowly raised her head, then let out an angry growl. At the edge of the roof, their form lit by the backdrop of the setting sun, stood a single man like a phantom among the corporal. What the? Who is this guy? His face was pale, deathly so. The pupils that resided within his sunken eyes were surrounded by bloodshot whites. Damn, there is a lot going on this rooftop here. His head hung toward the concrete, his face without his expression. The instant Senna saw the man, neither Takumi nor anything else mattered to her anymore. The man Senna had chased after without end, her sole object of hatred. The man that had abandoned her and betrayed his family entirely. That very man now stood right before her very eyes.
ようやく見つけた。
Senna took a step toward the man, gritting her teeth to hold back her overflowing hatred. She once again brandished her D-sword. Another step forward.
どうしようもなかった。私はお前の母さんを生贄に捧げるしかなかったんだ。
What the fuck?
黙れ。
母さんの最後はとても安らかなものだったよ。だからセナ、安心してほしい。母さんのおかげで素晴らしい実験結果が出た。母さんは世界のために役立ったんだ。お前も母さんの功績を誇っていい。
黙れよ！
Blood rushed to Senna's head, rendering her no longer able to see anything other than the man that stood before her. She dashed. It happened in an instant. She flew at the man's breast, closed the distance between her and it, and then sunk her D-sword deep into its center. That was Senna's long-held desire. She had roamed Shibuya daily, for the sole purpose of killing this man. She had dreamt of the day she would kill him countless times. It had never left her mind. I don't really know what to take from all this, to be honest.
母さんの仇を。
She went to remove her sword, which would grant her the opportunity to move away from the man. But before her sword could come free, the man wrapped his arms around Senna and gently embraced her.
よせ！気安く触るな！
Her entire body stood on end. Him doing this now, after everything that had happened, only served to nauseate her. Long ago in the distant past, the bond of family between Senna and the man had been severed. Even so, for some reason, she was unable to comprehend. Senna could not bring herself to throw off the man, an inability that deeply surprised her. His warmth, his large chest, the deeply real presence of her father, her hands dyed in red. I feel like this is a revenge story that would have been helpful to have some, like, lead up to, but alright, cool.
こんなの
あなたが
お前が望んだ妄想だ。
望んだ妄想だよ。
Ayo? When she heard that whisper, Senna immediately understood. Errors slipped into dead spots, psychological attacks, enchantment, seeing someone's delusion. When Senna realized her mistake, it was already too late. Oh, I see now. She lost her balance, and together with the man, her body was cast off the roof. To Senna, the ground that lay 8 stories below looked oh so far away. So, was that Rimi's doing? Unable to comprehend what the hell was going on, all I could do was watch as the scene unfolded. Yeah, honestly. Senna had suddenly run to the edge of the roof, lost her balance for no reason I could see, and was about to plunge to the ground right this very second. Her body was about to disappear beyond the edge.
落ちる。
I can only let out a whisper. I tightly closed my eyes. She had committed suicide. Senna had intentionally dove to her death. I didn't understand why, as if I could understand. She'd assaulted me out of nowhere. Serves her right. That girl had just been yet another enemy. Wait, is she actually dead? No matter how long I waited, the resounding splat of her body hitting concrete did not come. I timidly opened my eyes and tried to see what was going on. Senna wasn't falling, instead she was on her knees. Rimi stood right beside her. She was holding Senna's arm. Had Rimi saved her? Senna threw her D-sword away and started crying like a child. What the hell was even going on anymore? From my perspective, it looked like Senna had tried to die out of her own volition.
辛い思いさせてごめんね。でもしょうがなかったの。
Well, I think I was right. She, I guess, threw a delusion at her. But for it to be so specific... Huh. Rimi had done something to Senna. The usually bright and happy girl I was used to felt like an entirely different person now. A brooding face, sorrowful whispers, quivering eyes. The girl standing over there wasn't the Rimi I knew.
先畑さん。
A voice reverberated in my mind. Kozupi hadn't moved from her position on top of the container house, meaning she was still staring down at us.
もう終了だよね。もしもセナさんのことぐしゃばきってしようとしてるならカズピ許さないぽん。先畑さんのことバラバラにしちゃうよ。
Yikes. A chill ran down my spine. Kozupi was speaking with her usual airheaded anime-esque tone of voice, but the things she was saying were deadly serious.
もう終わり。もともと葵さんのことどうこうするつもりはないし、タクの前から消えてくれるならこのまま解放する。それは無理。だってコズピーとセナちゃんとタクミちゃんはお友達だもん。
Yeah, I'm gonna highly doubt that one, dog.
ね、そうでしょタクミちゃん。
The gears in my mind refused to move. If someone told me that everything that just happened was a dream, I'd probably believe them just like that. Come to think of it, why had Senna attacked me so suddenly? Was Senna my enemy after all?
お前のせいだ。
Senna raised her head as she sobbed. She made no attempt to wipe away her tears and stayed on the ground where she had fallen to her knees. Her gaze was fixed on me.
お前のせいで私の家族は
I was completely bewildered. She was launching nothing but raw emotion at me. What the hell did she think I'd done? I hadn't done anything. I hadn't screwed with anyone's lives, and I certainly didn't know a damn thing about Senna's family. I was harmless as could be.
無害だと
She'd read my mind.
お前が生み出したものが世界を滅ぼすかもしれないっていうのに
Destroy the entire world? More Chuni shit again? I turned my gaze to Rimi for help, but she had her back to us. She stared vacantly at the darkening sky.
無駄だよ。
Her figure, her voice, she was the sheer loneliness, or was the sheer loneliness they gave off merely in my imagination?
タクは何も知らないから。
Yeah, I don't know anything either, guys. I just don't. With that statement, Rimi spoke as if she knew everything there was to know.
ふざけるな今渋谷を襲っている混乱は全部あの公式が発端なんだぞ
Formula?
それ以上言わないで。タクは本当に何も知らないの。
From the sounds of it, she was talking about me, but I couldn't follow the conversation at all.
公式ってこれのこと？
Kozubi leapt down from the container house, holding my essay in her hand. She held out the back of the essay to us. I saw what I doodled on it back in elementary school. Ir2. The chaos infesting Shibuya right now had started from this? Yeah, what is it? Fun to the 10th power times int to the whatever the fuck that says equals IR2. Talk about an absurd accusation. There was no way in hell some random doodle could affect anything, let alone of that magnitude. I just doodled that thing on a complete whim when I was bored or something, probably. It was a long time ago, so I don't remember it all that well. But I did know there was no real meaning behind it. I just copied down the numbers I'd seen in a dream. It was a dream related to whose eyes are those eyes, which I'd written about on the front. I'd used those words all the time, since even before I'd written it. And whenever I had, it would all take shape in my dreams more and more. Within one of those dreams were those numbers.
FUN の10乗かける
Yeah, fun to the 10th times
INT の40乗
INT to the 40th,
イ
okay.
コール IR2
Yeah, I don't know what any of that is supposed to mean, dog. I am so sorry. After a while, Senna wiped the tears from her eyes. Now they were a deep scarlet. While still on the ground, while still hanging her head down in regret, she formed a sentence.
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間世界は分岐したんだ
Huh? I know that term. I know that term very well.
ノア2に搭載されている中で最も秀でているのは中核システムに組み込まれたとある方程式です。
Oh boy, I wonder what that particular formula is.
これは人類史上未だ回答が見つかっていないとされているもの。
ミレニアム7のうちの一つかね。
億単位の懸賞金がかけられているという数学界で未だ未解決の7つの問題か。
いいえ、その7つの中には入っていません。ですが実はミレニアム7はもともと問題が8つあった。公開前に1つだけ削除されたのです。
それがノア2に組み込まれている方程式だと。
削除された理由は
世界に最悪をまき散らす可能性があるためというところです。
一体どのような数式なのだ。
基本相互作用における電磁気力を想定した共鳴現象。 それを表す計算式です。
Alright, I don't know what that is, so to the tips we go. In physics, this refers to any of the four basic forces that interact between elementary particles. These are electromagnetic interaction, gravitational interaction, weak interaction, and strong interaction. A theory that explains all elementary particles and the four fundamental interactions in a unified manner has yet to be established. If such a theory were ever finalized, it is predicted that it would be able to consistently explain. There's a mistake there. Come on, guys, fix it. Explain everything from the subatomic scale to the far corners of the universe. And we already know what this is, or at least I do.
これにより、特定の電磁パルスと受容体とが近接作用することで発現する未知の力が解明されました。各国が30年以上かけて開発し積み上げてきた沈黙の兵器の研究成果を一瞬にして過去のものとしてしまったんですよ。
その問題に回答を見つけた者は神になるに等しいというわけだ。
それを君が果たしたというわけかね。
それはとても不思議な場所から見つかりました。子供の落書きというね。Ir2 ノア2のいわゆるハードウェア部分はこの公式によって神に匹敵する能力を手に入れました。あとはソフトウェア部分に相当するギガロマニアックスのコードサンプルを集めればノア2は本格的に稼働し我々の望むもの全てを実現してくれるでしょう。
かのアインシュタインが現代に生きていればと思うよ。彼は高い能力を持つギガロマニアックスだったと聞く。
What the fuck?
家庭の話よりも現状がどうなっているかだ。ギガロマニアックスは世界中に数えるほどしかいないというではないか。大丈夫なのか？
すでに5人分のサンプルは確保しました。
ノア2稼働に十分な数は集まったようだね。
ならば結構。
Where the fuck did he get 5 samples?
ただサンプルが多ければ多いほどノア2の能力は向上します。特にどうしてもサンプルを採取したいギガロマニアックスの少年が一人いましてね。
だからといって計画の遅延は許されんぞ。
ノア2の本格稼働はいつ頃になりそうなのかね。
稼働前に最終実験としてサードメルトを行います。
また地震を起こそうと？
予測規模は？
想定では関東大震災と同レベル。
関東大震災クラスだと？
マグニチュード 7.9 だったかな。
Jesus.
現在の建築基準と免震対策レベルを考えれば町にかつてほどの大きな損害を及ぼすことはないでしょ
う。だが犠牲者の数はファーストセカンドの比ではなかろう。
およそ5000人ほどといったところです。少なく見積もってですが問題が
責任は貴様が取るのだろうな。
腹でも切って死んでみせますか？これが最終実験です。サードメルトが予定通りの成果を上げたときノア2は完全なる完成を見る。世界の可能性は我らの手の中に。
Well, that is most definitely the bad guy, but it just doesn't feel like we've really had any interaction with him whatsoever.
この公式をお前が生み出した瞬間、
Unless...
世界は分岐したんだ。
分岐って。
What, like with routes? This wasn't an arrow guy.
タク、もう行こう。話聞く必要なんてないよ。
Rimi pulled on my hand, pleading me to go inside my room. Her demeanor oozed feelings of desperation. Rimi was afraid of something.
葵さんが言ってることは全部嘘っぱちだし。
嘘はそっちだろ。
葵さん、もう帰って。タクの前から消えてよ。
Who should I believe?
たかが数式になんでそんなに目くじら立てるんだよ。
本当に何も分かってないのか。アインシュタインが唱えた E=MC の事情、これが発表されたことで核兵器が開発されるという未来が生まれたように、お前の生み出した IR2 もまた E=MC の事情と同じ、いやそれ以上の影響力を世界に与えている。 IR2 は沈黙の兵器を現実のものとした。
沈黙の兵器。
思考盗撮、視覚投影、五感制御。
Wasn't that the patented technology Senna had told me about before? The one that she was investigating.
ギガロマニアックスは特別。いや、異常ではなくなる。これからはこの忌々しい力を誰もが自由に使えるようになるんだ。IR2 を元に作られた装置によってな。もっとも、その前に一握りの腐った連中に独占され、人々は気づかないうちに家畜同然の立場になるよう洗脳されてしまうだろうが。
How would I have known all this? Go on and on about this shit till the end of time. It still wouldn't change that I didn't know anything. Even if Senna was speaking the truth, I never would have intentionally tried to make something so horrifying, not in a million years. It was just a doodle made by a kid. I hadn't done anything wrong.
それなら、そのアイアーム2は
IR2。
それはギガロマニアックスの力のことをキュッピーンって説明したものなんだ。やっぱりあのおじさんが言ってたのは本当だったのら。一番重要なのはその目、誰の目を生み出した少年なんだって。それってたくみちゃんのコートだったんだね。
Kozubi spoke in a carefree tone. I would never be able to act as innocent as she could. Just like me, Rimi also showed no signs of answering. Senna, meanwhile, opened her eyes wide and raised her head with a start. She rose to her feet, staggering. Why was her footing so unsteady? Did it have something to do with what Rimi had done to her earlier?
小杖、お前今なんて言った？
ホピ？
Senna drew closer to the puzzled girl, pressing her for answers.
おじしゃんって誰のことだ？
コズピーに理想度の大切さを教えてくれた人。東京に来て初めて話した人なの。なんかね、ふぎゅーって鼻つまみたくなっちゃう格好してて、へんてこなこと書いた板持ってたの。世界は終わるとかとか。
And apparently that's Senna's father? Or at least the person that killed her mother.
それを早く言わなかった。
そんなこと言われても。
あいつだ。やっと見つけた。
Me, Rimi, and Kozupi, the three of us, unable to understand what Senna meant, can only watch with confusion as Senna's blood-curdling demeanor boiled and bubbled.
私はやっとあいつを殺せる。
For real this time, apparently. Wow, I have no idea what's happening. Like, zero idea. There had once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment she had known nothing of. She was a perfectly ordinary housewife, and had been blessed with a second child in her womb before turning 40. No, perhaps perfectly ordinary might not have fit her quite so well. After all, her eldest daughter was already old enough to enter high school, a 15-year gap from the second child. She had been slightly worried that her eldest daughter, adolescent that she was, would oppose the pregnancy. However, the exact opposite proved to be true. Her daughter's heart sang when she heard the news. Her husband, An established scientist often lost himself in his research and faith, and rarely ever came home to his family. But when he was home, he always did his best to be a good husband and father. So while she housed some dissatisfactions, they would never surpass the love she held for her husband. Her second child was delivered without issue, a healthy girl of 2579 grams. She named the child Mana. Soon after, her husband was unfortunately made to transfer far away. Her husband held no capacity to support himself with even the most basic of life skills, forcing her to ask her stable daughter to go with him and tend to her father's needs. Since she was now living alone with the newborn Mana, they then opted to move to an affordable company housing as per her husband's plan. She had initially been living in an apartment within the suburbs, but this made transport inconvenient. The new company house, however, was in the best area in Shibuya, and many of her husband's colleagues' families lived close by. Her considerate husband claimed that because of this, there would be nothing to worry about in her times of need, including when she needed help with the baby. Every room in the company house was spacious, and she particularly favored the bedroom. One wall was home to a large mirror, and the opposite wall had an even larger window. From there, she could view the luscious greenery of Yoyogi Park. She then went to quickly befriend a housewife living close by, and received extraordinary treatment from the company, namely being provided a housekeeper. She was proud of her husband for holding such an important position within his company, one that allowed her to live in such a luxurious way, and so her life without worries nor dissatisfaction continued. 2 years passed while Mana had experienced delayed growth. She had grown into a healthy child, all while not contracting any major illnesses. She was a very pampered child. If she did not cradle Mana in her arms, the girl would start crying in a voice so shrill it could shatter even the thickest glass. Regrettably, she had fallen ill about a month prior. A particularly grave symptom was a fierce tinnitus, something she suffered from throughout most hours of the day. Fortunately for her, the housekeeper and the housewife next door were more than willing to assist her with taking care of Mana. Regardless of the help she received, she was essentially joined at the hip with Mana and was never able to part from her for even a moment. Even when going to the bathroom, even when taking a bath. If a thought were to cross her mind about having the housekeeper cradle the baby for a short time, Mana would detect these intentions and immediately burst into tears. Contrary to what one might surmise, she actually found endearment in how much Mana clung to her, but due to the inseparability of the two, she continued to live a life where she could never take even a single step out of her own home. Her lifestyle was entirely supported by the housekeeper and the housewife. For her, meeting the two had become her true saving grace. Oh, thank God we're done hearing that. However, over time, something odd began to happen with the two helpers. During a friendly chat in the living room that had occurred a week prior, the housewife had spontaneously vomited without warning. Paying no heed to the confusion she showed, the housewife then rushed outside. She had not seen her since, leaving her to worry that she had perhaps fallen ill. Concerned, she decided to ask the housekeeper if she could check on her. As the housekeeper left that day, she made her request, concluding with an "I'd love your help tomorrow as well, dear." And yet, when the housekeeper heard these words, she suddenly burst into tears and could only nod it again and again as she departed. Oh, God damn it. The tinnitus that had been tormenting her so became fiercer that night, to the point where it felt as if her head itself might split apart. She tried calling an ambulance, but the line refused to connect. She then tried going outside to ask the neighboring housewife for help, but even that proved too much for her. Throughout all this, her daughter had continued to cry incessantly, further agitating her pain. In order to endure this terrible pain, she embraced her beloved Mana, and as she did so, both the tinnitus and the crying abruptly stopped. The pain in her head vanished just as suddenly, almost as if it had never been there to begin with. She then looked down only to see that the child she was holding was a mummified corpse? In spite of how heavily it had been crying until that very moment, the body had suddenly become a desiccated, rotting mound of flesh, one that gave off the most repulsive stench. And so before she could even realize that it was all an experiment, her mind broke. What? There had once been a certain experiment, but it was an experiment that ran different to how he had hypothesized. Well, that's fucked up. He was a scientist at Nozomi Technology, a follower of the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light, the man at the center of Nozomi's strictly confidential Project Noah, and the man that had deciphered fun to the 10th power times int to the 40th power equals Ir2. He had offered his wife on the verge of childbirth as a test subject for the experiment. While that had been an instruction from the founder that he revered, it had been just as much his own suggestion, all to ensure the success of the experiment. It was christened the Mana experiment after the codename given to their second daughter. His eldest daughter of 15 was placed in a Cosmic Church of the Divine Light institution, all while he observed his confined wife and infant child for 24 hours a day. His wife had been led to believe that the place she resided in was a company house, but in reality, it was a test site that Nozomi Technology had prepared, a site containing the Noah 2 prototype he was developing. Mind reading, visual projection, and control over the 5 senses. In order to research the effects of such practices, he locked his wife and daughter, Mana, in the site as test subjects. Not much was known about the effects of electromagnetic radiation on the human body, so he very much intended to halt the experiment immediately if his wife or child showed any strange abnormalities. The experiment was then met with an unfortunate accident soon after it began. Mana passed away at 1 month of age, her cause of death unknown. It was an accident nobody could have prevented. He was overcome with sorrow and attempted to bring the experiment to a close, and yet such a thing was not permitted to him.
実に興味深いではないですか。
What part of this would be intriguing? This is fucking depressing. Those were the words of his employer. His employer was referring to the bizarre sight visible within the experiment. His wife did not seem to recognize Mana's death as real, and instead treated her remains as if they were still her child. In her eyes, Mana had never died. But in truth, these things were all a simple projection, a reality only she was privy to. This was an effect of the Noah 2 prototype, and in a certain sense, the situation provided an optimal opportunity to test its capabilities. Consequently, he had his wishes disregarded. Eventually, even he came to think that continuing the experiment would be best for his wife's sake. Looking upon the one-way mirror, his wife would embrace the corpse of their child and lived her every day in blissful happiness. She would gaze through the window toward the greenery of Yoyogi Park, but in reality, the window was a mere wallpaper and the scenery a projection. And yet she simply smiled at the view, all while gently tending to her child as she cooed. Staff belonging to the research team would take care of his wife, with one playing the role of a neighboring housewife and the other a housekeeper. As long as the experiment continued, her mind would never break. As such, he told himself that this was all for his wife's sake. Though in truth, perhaps his mind had broken far before his wife's ever could. At some point in time, his goal had changed from completing Noah 2 to forcing his wife to continue living an endless dream. After continuing the experiment for 2 years, his employer suddenly announced an end to the project.
データは十分取れました。ノア2本格稼働は間近です。この実験ももう続ける意味はないでしょう。
He vehemently opposed this, his desperation evident, and yet his passion had him branded a traitor, and he was subsequently removed from the project. As a gesture of kindness, he was permitted to be present at the test site on the final day of the experiment, albeit within restraints. and with him his daughter, of whom he had not seen across those full 2 years, was forced to be present. A look of bewilderment rose to her face when she noticed him.
父さん、これはどういうこと？母さんに何をしたの？母さんが抱いているのは一体。
He was unable to answer. His guilt over what he had done prevented him from looking his daughter in the eye. Meanwhile, the start of a ghastly ritual was drawing near. The housewife had long since become unable to endure Mana's rotting stench, and the housekeeper had left the test site in tears in response to his wife's words. Then the equipment was stopped. The dream ended. And his wife broke. In her eyes was once her child, had suddenly transformed into a mummy, a sight that brought her to scratch at her scalp, tear out her hair, dig her fingernails into the flesh of her face, and then... Please don't show us any of this, please, God. Began to ravenously devour the dissected body of her own child? Excuse me? Through every tear of flesh, she continued to laugh maniacally, bang her head against the wall, before eventually, she took a kitchen knife, drove the blade into her own eyes, and died right where she stood. The daughter cried and screamed as she watched her mother's horrific end from beyond the one-way mirror. Yeah, me too. His daughter was then taken away by 2 researchers, with one taking hold of each arm. He was not even granted the opportunity to pursue his only remaining relative.
すまない。すまない。
He blamed himself for everything, believing he had reaped what he himself had sowed. Regardless of his reasons, when he had resolved to continue the experiment 2 years ago, it had been obvious how things would end. Mere days after bearing witness to his wife's death, he vanished, and now nary a soul knew of his current whereabouts. Jesus Christ. I don't even know what to say to all I just read there. After everything had settled, Senna had gone on to interrogate... Oh, wait, okay, you know what? We're done with the flashback, so I'm done recording. Well, we'll keep it there. Jesus Christ. Yeah, I'm very confused with some of the decisions there. Like, the fact that he was completely content with allowing her to be the experiment specimen, if you will, to be completely experimented on without her consent, without her knowing anything, which had to have been done, I guess. That was a part of it, is her not knowing. But he being totally willing, and then having doubts, and then those doubts erased, allowing it to go on for 2 fucking years, not seeing his other daughter, and now his youngest being dead, especially, he just continued it to, he continued to allow it, straight up. And then that crazy end, he was brandished as a traitor because he wanted it to continue for his own selfish reasons. That made him a traitor. And he had to witness the end of the experiment like he absolutely had to. And so did his daughter, his oldest daughter, Senna. Why? I don't know. Maybe it was to... I don't know, push out the fucking D-sword, like make her go crazy so that, you know, her gigglomaniac powers would come to fruition or something. And that's another sample for the Noah project. This is probably how they very quickly got 5 samples. This crazy shit that they're doing. My God. All right. Well, I was planning on like ending this recording session like 15 minutes ago, but yeah, I'm glad I read through all that now because Wow. Yeah, what a doozy. All right. Thank you for watching this one. God damn. If you enjoyed this episode, somehow, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more. Hopefully none of that crazy shit. Well, not that horrific crazy shit, but the other crazy shit that you would come to expect here. Yeah, subscribe for that. And I will see you all in the next one. God damn.